Most people expect love to arrive loudly, especially from someone emotionally distant. They wait for dramatic confessions, intense affection, or some cinematic declaration that suddenly changes everything. But when an avoidant begins to genuinely see you as part of their future, it rarely looks like that. It happens quietly, subtly, in ways most people completely miss because they are too focused on listening to words instead of watching behavior. For an avoidant, love does not begin with expression. It begins with permission. They slowly begin allowing you access to parts of themselves they normally keep hidden from the world. Not instantly, not all at once, one small piece at a time. And every piece matters because vulnerability costs them something emotionally. People with avoidant tendencies often experience closeness as dangerous. Opening up feels like surrendering control. Caring deeply means risking pain, disappointment, and emotional dependency. So when they start showing you the unfiltered version of themselves, beyond the composed exterior or emotional mask, you are witnessing an enormous act of trust. They are not simply falling for you, they are consciously choosing to lower defenses they spent years building. There is a major difference between accidental emotion and intentional vulnerability. Avoidants do not stumble carelessly into attachment. For them, emotional closeness is a calculated risk. So when they start taking that risk with you, it means something profound is shifting internally. You'll notice it in small moments, before you ever hear it in words. Conversations that used to end abruptly begin lasting longer. Their body language softens around you. The tension in their posture eases. Their eyes hold contact a little longer than before. They stop looking at you like a possible threat and start looking at you like someone they are trying to understand deeply. It may appear like hesitation on the surface, but internally they are evaluating safety. They are asking themselves whether love can exist without losing their independence inside it. What causes that shift is not pressure, it is emotional safety. An avoidant does not open because someone demanded reassurance, chased harder, or forced emotional intensity. They open when they encounter someone whose presence feels calm instead of consuming. Someone who does not try to control their emotions but creates space for them naturally. Someone who sees them clearly without trying to rescue, fix, or overpower them. That is what disarms them. Avoidants are not secretly searching for perfection. They are searching for emotional peace. And once they begin associating you with peace instead of pressure, their instinct to run slowly weakens. The change is rarely dramatic. In fact, you will usually feel it before you can explain it. They begin asking deeper questions, not because they are making conversation, but because they genuinely want to understand who you are emotionally. They remember details you mentioned casually weeks ago. They send random messages during the day just to maintain connection. Not out of dependency, but because contact no longer feels threatening. Many people mistake an avoidant's slow pace for lack of interest, but to someone with avoidant attachment, moving slowly is often how they create safety. Every emotional step forward requires trust. Every vulnerable moment is another layer of armor being removed. And when they finally start revealing insecurities, fears, regrets, or emotional wounds, that is not attention-seeking behavior. That is intimacy in its rawest form. It is their way of saying, "You matter enough for me to risk being fully seen." Psychologically, this process is massive for them. Avoidants are often driven by a deep fear of engulfment, the belief that love will eventually take away their freedom, identity, or emotional stability. So when they begin lowering their guard, they are literally challenging old emotional programming. Their nervous system slowly starts learning that connection does not automatically equal suffocation. In many ways, you are watching someone heal through trust, not through lectures, not through self-help books, but through repeated emotional experiences that teach them closeness can feel safe instead of dangerous. That is why those quiet emotional openings should never be taken lightly. Every confession, every vulnerable silence, every laugh they share freely, every moment they stay emotionally present instead of shutting down, carries weight. You are not just being included in their routine. You are being invited into a world they normally protect at all costs. For someone who built their identity around emotional distance, that invitation is not casual affection, it is faith. Because avoidants rarely prove love through speeches, they prove it through access. When they stop hiding parts of themselves from you, when they no longer analyze every feeling before expressing it, when they simply allow themselves to exist comfortably in your presence, what they are truly saying is, I trust you with the parts of me I usually protect. And trust like that is extremely rare for them. So if you notice their walls softening, do not rush the process. Do not demand faster vulnerability than they are ready to give. Because what you are witnessing is delicate. It is the beginning of permanence for someone who once believed permanence was impossible. When an avoidant finally lets themselves be seen by you, you are not just loved, you are intentionally chosen. And that kind of love carries a depth most people never experience. Another powerful sign appears when they begin reflecting your emotional energy. To many people, this can look like imitation, but it is something much deeper than that. When an avoidant starts mirroring your energy, it is usually a subconscious sign that their nervous system feels safe around you. Avoidants do not mirror others to impress them. They mirror because emotional safety naturally creates alignment. You may notice them matching your calmness, adjusting to your communication rhythm, or subtly reflecting your emotional tone. It is not manipulation. It is emotional synchronization. Their system is beginning to regulate itself through your presence. Most people overlook this because they expect love to be loud and obvious. But deep attachment, especially for avoidance, often reveals itself quietly. Psychologically, mirroring is one of the strongest unconscious bonding behaviors humans have. People naturally mimic those they trust or feel emotionally connected to. So when an avoidant starts mirroring you, it means you are no longer registered as emotional danger. You have become emotionally safe enough for them to attune to. Early on, avoidants often keep interactions structured and emotionally detached. Their communication feels polite, predictable, but distant. Not because they lack feelings, but because they are studying the emotional environment carefully. They are trying to determine whether your presence brings peace or emotional instability. Then something changes. Their responses become warmer. Their timing starts aligning with yours. The emotional rhythm between you begins to feel natural instead of forced. They text because they genuinely want connection, not because they feel obligated to maintain it. Many people misunderstand this stage. They assume the avoidant is simply copying behavior. But mirroring is actually the subconscious language of emotional bonding. It happens when defenses soften enough for emotional connection to form naturally. And this is not some calculated strategy. Avoidants are not secretly thinking about how to manipulate attachment once real feelings develop. What is happening is neurological. Their brain's empathy and mirror neuron systems are beginning to respond to your emotional state. They are emotionally syncing with your pace, your energy, your calmness. This is why your emotional consistency matters more than emotional intensity. Avoidants do not respond well to pressure, emotional chaos, or constant demands for reassurance. But they do respond to stability. When your energy feels grounded and secure, their nervous system starts associating closeness with peace instead of conflict. That is when the mirroring deepens. They begin reflecting your emotional maturity. If you communicate calmly, their defensiveness softens. If you respect boundaries, they slowly begin respecting them too. If you stop chasing them emotionally, their instinct to run decreases. Not because of games, because your presence is teaching them a new emotional experience. The deepest paradox of avoidant attachment is this: they crave love intensely while simultaneously fearing it. Yet when they consistently experience emotionally safe connection, their understanding of love slowly transforms. Love stops feeling like a battlefield and starts feeling like rest. That is when true bonding begins. You will notice they become more emotionally present. They ask thoughtful questions. They remember details. They engage more deeply instead of remaining emotionally hidden. For perhaps the first time, intimacy stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like home. So, if an avoidant begins mirroring your energy, your patience, your emotional steadiness, understand the significance of it. You have become a place where their heart no longer feels the need to defend itself constantly. Do not force the process. Do not overanalyze every small shift. Just continue embodying calm consistency, because your presence is teaching them something life may never have taught them before. That love does not always have to wound. It does not always have to overwhelm, and it does not always have to end in loss. Sometimes love can simply feel safe. And when an avoidant starts mirroring you, it is not imitation. It is transformation. You're not just changing the way an avoidant behaves. You're slowly changing the way they understand love itself. Every calm response, every moment of patience, every peaceful interaction begins reshaping their emotional blueprint. Little by little, they stop associating love with pressure, conflict, or emotional danger. And when they eventually reflect that same energy back to you, it's not manipulation. It's trust beginning to take root inside someone who once feared permanence completely.
When an avoidant starts imagining forever with you, even their silence changes meaning. At the start of most relationships, distance is their defense mechanism. They pull away not because they don't care, but because emotions feel overwhelming. Space becomes their way of protecting themselves from feelings they never learned to process safely. But deep love changes that. Their silence stops being escape and starts becoming reflection. Instead of running from the relationship, they begin trying to understand it and understand themselves within it. For avoidance, love is rarely instant surrender. It's a slow, internal awakening. They process emotions privately because solitude has always been the safest place for them to think, breathe, and regain control. But once trust develops, something shifts psychologically. Their nervous system slowly stops seeing closeness as a threat. Your presence begins to feel safe instead of consuming, and that changes everything. They no longer pull away to reject you. They pull away to regulate themselves so they can reconnect more clearly. Unfortunately, many people misunderstand this stage. They assume silence means disinterest or abandonment. But when an avoidant truly cares, silence often means emotional processing, not rejection. To them, vulnerability can feel like drowning. They need moments to come up for air before stepping forward again. That's why patience becomes one of the most powerful forms of communication in these relationships. When you stop chasing, pressuring, or emotionally cornering them, you create the calm space their nervous system needs to feel safe. Your steadiness becomes the reason they return, instead of retreat permanently. And when they come back, you'll notice the difference. Their tone softens, their presence feels warmer, their communication becomes more intentional. They return not as someone escaping intimacy, but as someone learning how to hold it. That is not weakness. That is emotional growth. This is the stage where avoidance slowly transforms into commitment. They begin realizing that love does not require losing individuality. It requires balance. They learn that intimacy and independence can exist together, instead of competing against each other. And that's how avoidants begin loving long-term. Not through constant closeness, but through intentional return. Another major transformation happens when they start protecting your emotional peace as carefully as they once protected themselves. At first, it's subtle. They become more mindful of their words, more aware of how their moods affect the relationship. more intentional about maintaining emotional harmony between you. Because this shift isn't about control, it's about care. For most avoidants, love once felt dangerous. Vulnerability meant exposure, and exposure meant pain. Their instinct was always self-protection. But once deep attachment forms, that instinct changes direction. Instead of protecting themselves from connection, they begin protecting the connection itself. That's emotional maturity happening in real time. They start considering how their actions affect you. They think ahead emotionally. They become less reactive during conflict. Withdrawal softens, defensiveness decreases, and for perhaps the first time, they begin taking responsibility for the emotional impact they have on another person.
That is not casual affection. That is love reshaping identity.
Psychologically, their nervous system is reorganizing itself around connection instead of fear. They still need space, but their need for space no longer comes at the expense of your emotional well-being.
They begin protecting both their peace and yours.
You'll notice them avoiding unnecessary chaos, listening more carefully during disagreements, and correcting themselves because hurting the relationship no longer feels worth protecting their ego.
That isn't submission, it's integration. They are learning how to stay independent
while still practicing empathy, emotional responsibility, and care. For someone who once believed closeness was weakness, that takes enormous courage.
And here's the irony. The moment they begin protecting your peace, they also begin healing themselves. Because love becomes a mirror.
When they protect your emotional well-being, they learn emotional regulation. When they respect your boundaries, they learn to respect their own. And when they stop bringing chaos into the relationship, they slowly free themselves from that chaos internally too.
This is where real transformation happens. Avoidants may not always say, "I love you," through dramatic words. Often they say it through gentleness, restraint, and emotional awareness. Sometimes their version of love sounds like, "I don't want to hurt you."
So when someone who once avoided vulnerability begins protecting the relationship instead of running from it, understand how significant that shift truly is.
This is no longer someone escaping connection. This is someone learning how to preserve it. And when an avoidant begins protecting your peace, you stop being just another person in their life. You become the place where their heart finally feels safe enough to stay.
Avoidants spend much of their lives building their identity around independence. Their sense of safety comes from believing they can handle everything alone. Depending on someone emotionally feels dangerous because, at some point, vulnerability became connected to disappointment, pressure, or losing control.
But when an avoidant finally experiences real emotional safety, something inside them begins to shift. The belief of, "I don't need anyone," slowly evolves into, "I don't need anyone to survive, but I truly want you in my life." And that difference changes everything. For avoidants, wanting someone is far more meaningful than needing them. Need can feel threatening. Choice feels safe. So when they begin making space for you emotionally, mentally, and practically, it's not weakness. It's one of the deepest forms of love they can offer. Most avoidants once saw relationships as limitations. Love felt like something that would eventually take away their freedom or overwhelm their emotional space. To protect themselves, they convinced themselves that distance was strength. But then they meet someone different, someone calm, someone emotionally steady, someone who doesn't chase, pressure, or suffocate them. And for the first time, closeness stops feeling dangerous. Instead of feeling trapped, they begin feeling understood. Connection no longer feels like losing themselves. It feels like discovering parts of themselves they buried long ago. That's when the transformation begins. Slowly, they start reorganizing their life around the relationship. Their language shifts from me to we.
They include you in future plans naturally. They compromise on things they once protected fiercely. This isn't surrender, it's integration. They're learning how to combine independence with intimacy, instead of seeing them as opposites. Psychologically, this is huge. Avoidants operate through self-protection. Their nervous system associates distance with safety. But when trust grows, their brain slowly begins rewiring itself. Instead of closeness creating anxiety, it starts creating calm. Your presence becomes peace instead of pressure, and that changes everything. They begin opening up more naturally. They express affection more freely, not because they feel forced to, but because love finally feels safe enough to experience fully. The old version of themselves slowly fades. The one who believed attachment was weakness. The one who equated emotional distance with strength. The one who thought isolation was freedom. And in its place, a healthier understanding emerges. True strength is being able to stay connected without losing yourself. That's why avoidants who truly love don't love casually. Once they reach this stage, their commitment runs deep because they consciously chose the relationship despite every instinct that once told them to run from it. And eventually, one major shift always happens. They stop running from love and start fighting for it. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It comes after countless internal battles between the heart that wants connection and the mind that fears vulnerability. But when they finally meet someone emotionally grounded, someone secure enough not to chase, but stable enough not to disappear, they begin confronting their fears instead of escaping them. That's when they realize something painful. Avoiding love never protected them. It only isolated them. And once that realization happens, fear slowly starts losing power. You'll notice it in small but undeniable ways. They start taking emotional risks. They initiate conversations they once avoided. They stay present during difficult moments instead of withdrawing. Their effort becomes sincere, not perfect, not dramatic, but real. The kind of effort that quietly says, "I care enough to try."